So I just got back from spending a week in the mountains of Arizona with Larkin, and I came back to the busy noise of the city thinking about, man, I got to get out there in nature more often and get off to myself out by, out in the middle of nowhere where I can have some peace and quiet. And then today I come back and we have guests that are going to talk to us about the importance of silence. It's almost like everything's coming together. Let's get into it.
From Dallas, Texas, this is Anarchast.
Greetings, anarchists. Welcome back to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I will be Patrick Smith, and that intro music was not any normal intro music. That was created by a liberty lover named Monty Riches. There's a link in the bottom of the description. You can go find his YouTube channel and more of his music. Thanks, Monty, for letting us have your music for the show. That's awesome. Today's guests are the founders of the Quantum Questions. Sam says she's been studying a path of what she calls quantum transformation for the last 4 years and is fascinated with spirituality and personal growth. Greg, an entrepreneur and coach, says that an agitated mind is the number one challenge facing humanity today. Welcome to the show, Samantha and Greg. How are you?
Hi, Patrick. Thank you. We're really good. Thank you. Yeah,
very well.
Is it Sam or Samantha? Which do you prefer?
Call me Sam. That's fine.
All right, Sam it is. So I found out this was your first year attending Anarchapulco. And now that that's over and you're back home, I would love to hear your thoughts. What was your impression of the event?
Oh, so we've been fans of Jeff and Anarchapulco since the beginning, really. So we've been watching from the UK, and so we were really excited to actually go there in person, and we were really impressed. We felt that the organisation was excellent, really. Wonderful group of people, fantastic speakers. We really enjoyed speaking there. And do you want to say a little bit as well, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a professional event, and listening closely, people were saying that they felt it was really the most balanced event that they'd experienced. There was a sense of order and peace about the event that I think was a little bit of a surprise to people who'd been there over the years or had watched the documentary. Yeah, to us, it was a perfect environment, very family orientated. And, that's how we felt. We felt like we were part of a bigger family, giving our contribution and listening closely to other people's.
I definitely gushed about the event more than I ever have in any previous year. And then people in the comments were obviously like, oh, Patrick's just biased because, he's, I don't know, involved with the event, or it's, self-promotion or something like that. I had nothing to do with running the event this year. I was not paid. I did speak, but I made nothing off the event. And so I'm as unbiased as I've ever been. And I'm telling you, I really feel like the event was run better than it had ever been run previously. So it was very, very well done. Shout out to Catherine and the whole team for pulling that off as well as they did. So you, like myself, the first time I attended the event was a year I was asked to speak. And so it was interesting for me attending this type of event for the first time and also speaking for the first time. How was your experience as speakers?
So we were treated really well. We had VIP treatment. We were in a really wonderful hotel by the beach, and yeah, we felt really welcome. We felt that it was very professional, and we loved the venue. So the whole thing really for us was pretty perfect. And I know that from speaking to many people, it wasn't always like that, but like many organizations, it goes through stages and it evolves, and that is down to the people who are organizing it, evolving and growing. And I think Jeff even said himself that he's grown and evolved. So things change as the people change. In fact, that's happened with our organization as well.
Yeah.
As we've grown spiritually and as people, our organization has grown, and some people have left, some people have joined. So yeah, we absolutely loved it, and we loved the venue, and we were treated really well, and we had a great experience. So do you want to say something?
I think that covers it.
What did you actually? The first question I have to ask you that I almost always forget is: you guys are both anarchists. Tell us your story. How did you become anarchists?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, for me, I was brought up in a Catholicized environment, and I went to a junior seminary as a young boy, which was a priest training school, and saw the abuses firsthand inside an organizational level. My grandfather was a member of parliament. My great grandfather was a member of parliament. My uncle was a member of parliament. So also saw the political system, and then saw how badly treated they were, which is a completely separate story. But then over the years, inside of money and finance, I was accused of a fraud. I spent 14 years inside of the belly of the system, where the UK Inland Revenue, the tax system, decided myself and some friends of mine had committed a fraud. They arrested us on the basis of kick the doors in now and we'll ask questions later. It went to the High Court in the UK. The judge kicked it out at half time because he was that disgusted with the lack of evidence and the approach that the UK Revenue had taken. So a series of events, Patrick, whether inside of so-called religious organizations or inside of the belly of the beast, seeing firsthand how despicable the system really is.
Let me just ask some questions to clarify. So I'm not familiar with how prevalent religion is there where you live. I'm here in the South in the U.S., so it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's ubiquitous. I was under the impression that it was almost non-existent where you live. Is that not the case anymore, or what's it like there? Just in general
now
religion?
It is.
It is,
yeah,
really?
General religion. It's dying. No, it's dying.
Oh, okay.
As in, the churches are empty, the synagogues are empty. They're building the flats, apartments, converting them into real estate, or they're used for other things like as catwalks for fashion shows. But they've deconsecrated the holy places and the altars. So,
do you still consider yourself a believer in God, or did you leave that behind?
No, I do believe in a beneficent force. I believe in God, but I have a very my belief in God is that we're all one. We're all part of this divine consciousness.
Can you talk about one of the facets of your experience in seminary that led you to your current worldviews in some way? Like, was there something?
Yeah, so
you obviously don't have to. If it's something terrible or personal, obviously you don't have to talk about it. I'm just curious if there was something.
Yeah. Boys were abused, since the some of the priests. So there's priests who I knew at the school at the time, have committed suicide, sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. So there was a paedophile ring in operation, and it didn't directly touch me. The thing that was fortunate for me is I was sent to the school at the age of 11, but I haven't grown since I was 11. I was massive as an 11-year-old. And I think it was a huge advantage for me. And I was also streetwise. I was from Liverpool, which is a dock area. People have got to be fast. You've got to be quick-witted. And so that gave me a level of security and safety in an environment where other boys' minds were destroyed, so.
Interesting. What was so obviously I think then if you were in a Catholic seminary, you had a very different belief in God than what you just described. How did that transition happen? What was the catalyst of your change in idea on that?
Yeah, so the transition is you're born into family religion culture. I was born into an Irish Catholic family. My mother, even up to her dying day, was a daily rosary, daily mass person.
Mm-hmm.
And she would say things to me like, well, you do know where you're going when you die, Gregory, don't you? So, just to sort of accentuate the type of environment. Whereas, my journey was towards a loving God. My belief now is we lead from the heart center, whereas the Catholics, along with the rest, or almost the rest of society, lead from the mind. And, the mind thinks in a dualistic way, and most people in their lifetime don't get out of the mind. So they're constantly thinking in right and wrong, left and right, up and down. Whereas, when we look at the ancient texts, they point us to moving beyond understanding, which is moving beyond the mind. And the curiosity becomes, well, where's that? And, I was then fortunate enough to meet what I now class as my teacher, who has been able to instruct me and guide me in spending large amounts of time in meditation, in silence, and in various forms of practice, spiritual practice, which has led me to a heart-opening experience and an understanding of a connection which is beyond the limitation that I spent years living in. And what I mean by that is I became more and more isolated, more and more separate. It became about I, me, mine. It became about greed. And, so that was the disconnection from me.
How long ago was it that you met that teacher? How long ago was that?
Yeah, only 6 years ago.
Oh, okay. Now, did you, correct me if I'm wrong, definitely, because I hope, were you prosecuted and acquitted for fraud?
No, I was arrested at gunpoint, dragged out of my bed, accused of fraud. It was tried. It was the biggest case. It was a £28 million claim.
Holy crap!
That they were making, which we did take the money out of the system, but we took it out legally. And so, but the authorities didn't like the fact that we'd actively demonstrated a way of technically printing money using the system. And in the court case, just to give you an example, because my brother-in-law was tried with me, and the revenue were arguing, well, if A, B, and C wasn't possible, they could never have done.
Sorry to interrupt. When you say revenue, is that like your tax authority?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, go ahead. What were you saying?
Yeah. So when they were prosecuting and they were saying, if they hadn't have been able to do A, B, and C, they never would have been able to do this scheme. And my brother-in-law, who's an international chess master, he's got a first-class maths degree. He's a member of the Institute of Stockbrokers. He was sat next to me going with a pen on a pad. We could have done it this way. We could have done it that way. We could have done it this way. We could have done it that way. So, what all that they were annoyed with is the fact that we'd exposed a loophole. And then when the judge even summed up, so at halftime, the judge said, I've heard enough. It then gets expedited down to the High Court in London, and it has to be reheard within a week. And this is done under secrecy. Not that it's of any interest really to many people, but they then do the hearing where the Lord Chief Justice himself, with two of his acolytes, look at the case very closely, and then he supported the judge's finding that we had no case to answer.
Wow.
He did point out to the prosecution they could have prosecuted it differently, which I thought was quite strange. We were then sent back to the original court, where they discharge us and say, okay, there's no case to answer. But the judge makes a statement at the time, and the judge says, but what I need you gentlemen to understand is that I cannot tell you that your scheme was legal because I am not a tax judge. But it's just really interesting that they've got their fingers into the court system, even to that degree, that it's blatantly obvious, the scheme worked and the scheme was legal, or we all would have been sent to jail. But the judge just makes the statement at the end, just as a final shot. And then the Inland Revenue in the reporting said the reason that they didn't win the case 14 years on was because they didn't have enough time to prosecute us.
So this was 28 million of government money that you managed to get through a loophole? Is that? Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I have to ask the obvious question. What about that process led you to now calling yourself an anarchist? Where was the connection there?
Yeah, so if the UK legal system is the most corrupt system, one of the most corrupt systems I've ever encountered. In as much as the minute I was in the system and the other people who were involved with us, it didn't matter if we were innocent or not. Everyone was keeping us in because of the payday. So not only did we extract 28 million, but the case itself cost another 13 million to prosecute.
Wow.
And that was the extraction that the lawyers and the barristers took for the work that they did. So at no point, even if we've got bright lights flashing, these men are innocent, even if some divine power has served them papers to say that we are innocent, that group of legal people are not in any way wanting to represent any form of innocence. They want the case to run for as long as it can, because that's the way they milk the system.
Okay, so just the corruption of the judicial system is what kind of made you question the status quo?
Yeah, it's horrific.
Oh, no,
absolutely.
That's part of my story to anarchy as well. The corruption and the insanity and the maleficence of the law enforcers is what got me down my path, made me question everything I had always been told about the heroes that are the police. Sam, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll give you another couple of examples that I think the listeners might enjoy. On the day that we were arrested, they asked to take our blood. And I'm like, well, you can't take my blood. What do you want my blood for?
That's mine.
Surely it's my blood. I'm innocent until proven guilty. But no, following the official Terrorism Act, everybody that's arrested isn't then arrested on the grounds of potential terrorism. And so under the terrorism laws, they're allowed to take your blood. So there's one, and it's just horrific where it's this beyond the reach of, the legislation wasn't intended for that purpose. Here's guys being accused of so-called tax fraud, but actually we're now going to use the official Terrorism Act in order to extract their blood.
Sure.
And then another example in the case itself, on the first day, the UK tax people, the Inland Revenue, asked to substitute their expert witness. And we're like, whoa, hang on, this guy's been on this job for 14 years and we're going to annihilate him because he's done such a bad job of claiming what we've done to be true. So anyway, the judge says, well, okay, I'll hear the arguments for this. So they take 3 days listening to the arguments, which is the request for the substitution of their expert witness for a new expert witness. At the end of the 3 days, the judge finds in our favor and says, no, you can't substitute your expert witness. At which point the prosecution rises to his feet and says, okay, well, Your Honor, he retired on the grounds of ill health 5 years ago. And what we found to be the case is they'd strong-armed him and put him under incredible pressure for them to be able to even put a case together. Basically, being asked to lie. And he knew that he couldn't come into court to defend an undefendable position. But the way that they tried to manipulate it was to get another young pawn into the game in order for them to be able to follow this criminal line of prosecution against us. So
that's, we could probably spend a whole show just going into the details of that case. It sounds very interesting, and I have tons of questions. But Sam, I would love to hear your story. Well, actually, one last question. How long ago was that? How long ago was the moment when you said, "Wow, I think I'm an anarchist now"? And how long? Like, what was the difference in time between when all that case stuff happened and that moment that you may have had that was like, "Okay, I guess I'm an anarchist"?
Yeah, I think, Patrick, at heart, I think I've always been an anarchist. I've always been anti-establishment, but in terms of really nailing it on, because I was involved in the system, so really in terms of nailing it on, definitely from the arrest, because, you know, seeing how the dissolution of a family unit, seeing how nobody could look me in the eye, the minute you're up against the beast, everyone thinks you're guilty. You know, accountants folded who'd been paid hundreds of thousands, solicitors disappeared. If these people are after you, surely you're guilty. And just this build, constant build on top of, until you're like, okay, not only is the system, it's rotten. And just, you know, in terms of, we were preparing to fight for our innocence. But in the period up to the case and during the case, we had to break the law, not being lawbreakers. We had to then break the law to be able to put money to one side for the families, just in case we were all sent to prison. And the only way that we could do that was by breaking the law. So here's us as law-abiding citizens operating professionally. Yes, we used a loophole. But it was a legal loophole that was their own stupidity that it was available.
This is like a tax loophole or something like that?
Yeah, I could share it with you. I mean,
it's fine. It's fine.
It's an interesting wheeze where we basically lent people the money to make the maximum pension contribution that they could make, and we would lend them the money. But then the way we routed it, we could just use the same 100,000 over and over and over and keep rerouting it through a company. And this company then became worth more and more and more in value. But it was actually legal for us to replicate this process over and over. And we do it by issuing shares. Anyway, this fund blossomed to 28 million. And the spoils, we shared the spoils with the clients. So we saw ourselves as a Robin Hood scheme. We were taken from the system, and the people involved got half, and we got half. So when they went out to interview the people to say, you know, we want to prosecute these guys, they were like, well, yeah, but we made a load of money out of this. And then they said, well, actually, we're thinking of also prosecuting you. So they targeted the clients as well. But just to answer your question, during that process, it nailed it on for me. This system's rotten to the core. And in fact, you know, from an anarchy point of view, it was blatantly obvious to me that the mafia was the system.
Did you meet Sam before all this or after all this, or how recently have you guys met?
So we met actually when he was in the court case. And facing 10 years in jail, but I just knew he wasn't going to go to jail. So I just had a knowing. And so I'll just tell you that sort of my story. So sure, I was lucky enough to be raised in a family where we were quite alternative. So I was introduced to a form of meditation age 5. We would use homeopathic medicine instead of going to the doctor. Or we'd go to the doctor, find out what was wrong, and then treat it holistically. And then both my parents were, very anti-vaccine because my mother's brother, he'd actually got polio from the polio vaccine. So she decided she wasn't going to get me vaccinated. So that was in the 70s. She fought when I was a baby. They was phoning her up saying, your baby needs a jab. She was saying, no, no, no. So then that sort of put me on that path. My dad was always talking about the evil drug companies and how corrupt they are, and saying, they're worse than the drug cartels. And so I thought, oh, does that mean drugs are okay then? So anyway, so he was, he got me into doing my research. And then I think I was just born a rebel anyway, because I think age 5, I was saying to my mum, I don't want you walking me to school, I'm fine. And then I decided I wasn't having my vaccines at school. And I was sitting at school thinking, this is like prison. And I just knew there was something wrong. And it just felt wrong. And then I got into the corporate world, the workplace, and that felt wrong. Sitting in an office, it felt like prison. And so I was on this path of discovery, but also spirituality. So I learned transcendental meditation when I was 14. Both my parents were into, as I said, alternative therapies. So my dad had something called electrocrystal therapy that he trained in. So he was measuring the energy of an apple with this machine. And that was when I was at school. So I was used to all this kind of, stuff about the universe, vibrational universe. And I was interested in learning more. So I was a seeker, and I had David Icke books in my 20s. So I was learning about all of that, and I loved a good conspiracy theory. And so it just went on from there, really. And then I found Jeff, but when he first started, I think it was about 9 years ago, and I was following him. And then when the pandemic hit, that's when I really started to look into things a bit more, because I just knew that was, it was not real. And I was actually really shocked. I just thought most people thought the way I did. And I was really shocked that people were so brainwashed. I just couldn't believe it. But to be honest, because I'd been on a spiritual journey and also been doing something called rebirthing, which is rebirthing breath work, for the last 10 years, I'd sort of not been watching TV, so I wasn't in that world anyway. And I'd also we've been together 8 years, so I decided that I wanted to find someone to go on this spiritual path with me. I'd looked into Tantra, and I knew that was the path that I wanted to go on. So I did a load of manifesting. Greg came to a group that I started called Creating Conscious Relationships. And then we found our teacher, and we've been studying with him ever since. And we both, in fact, since we've been doing, deeper spiritual practice, it really makes you, we both became vegetarian and now becoming vegan. And I never thought I would do that, but it's something that's happening naturally. And also just this feeling of no fear around things, and feeling that we don't need government. I always thought we don't really need government, but more so now, because I think we've been learning more, but also doing all this high level spiritual practice. And it just feels like they are, they just don't need to be here in our world. And we're not, we just feel kind of detached from it. So that's my journey.
It reminds me of I interviewed Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of the mRNA technology behind the vaccine, on my other channel, Disenthrall. And he brought up two things that you just made me think of. The first thing he talked about how there's this 20-20-60 in the population. So 20% of the population blindly follow whatever they're told they need to do. 20% of the population really thinks critically and resists being controlled and doesn't march in line with the rest of the NPCs. and then 60% are just kind of like tribal. They sort of follow in a different way. And the second thing that he talked about that you just made me think about. I think I lost it actually. Oh, yeah, that's what it was. At the very end of the interview, because I had been asking him for solutions the whole time, and he's still a statist at the end of the day. But at the end of the interview, I told him, I was like, hey, I really think, and I think it's pretty clear to see that the only way you can rescue the medical establishment in the country or in the world is to have a complete separation of state and medicine. Just 100% get the government and their power and their corruption completely out of medicine. And he's like, well, no, you gotta have a little bit of government regulation to stop grifters. And I'm like, Malone, dude, what? I should have said this, but I didn't. I said, what do you think we've been experiencing the past 2 or 3 years? Like, I think the grifters are already here. It's just that they've installed themselves into government itself. Anyway, that was an interesting interview. If you guys are interested, definitely go check it out. But what was the moment for you, Sam, where, again, I always think there's this moment, and maybe I'm projecting myself on other people when I say this, but like, there was a very clear moment for myself where I was like, holy shit, I think I'm an anarchist now. And kind of taking on that label has a moment. It's got like a little bit of power behind that in your personal paradigm. Did you experience that? And if so, when and what was that like?
I think it was when I was at school and I was 15 and all the kids were lining up for their vaccines and I was the only one.
The only one. No, so maybe it's less than 20% where you live.
So, yeah. And I remember everyone saying, are you not getting yours? And I said, no. And I was really absolutely determined. I mean, I've always been determined and kind of stubborn with certain things, but I was really determined and I just said no, and I was the only one. So I wasn't afraid of not being with the crowd or, not standing out. And I did feel like an anarchist then. So yeah, I guess that was it. And recently we've been listening to Mark Passio, and his talks are fantastic. So I've realized I am a true anarchist, and also in the spiritual sense. Awesome. He's talking about, the anarchy and the truth and how our freedoms are aligned to our moral path as the human race, really. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, you guys have some interesting stories. That was neat. Thanks for sharing those with us. What did you speak about at Anarchapulco this year?
So we spoke about silence, and we talked about silence, the importance of silence in the inverted world. That was the title of the talk. So for us, the inversion is, you could see it as the extraversion. So this is the pursuit of worldly gain, materialism, the idea of accumulating bigger, quicker, faster. And this is being driven through our society. But what happens as a consequence of that is the mind just gets busier and busier and busier. So if we take, for example, a wealthy individual who's been dedicated to accumulating material wealth, there's a certain focus and energy that goes with that. But there's a point at which they become concerned either with keeping score, so they start to compare themselves next to others, which creates additional noise, or they start to become worried about losing what they've got, or actually having the property that they've now accumulated damaged. So, but this is just a busyness of the mind. It's a mental game. And then the mental game is further exacerbated by the fact that the commercial bodies need to sell more stuff. So what they need to do is hijack the attention of people to get them to want to consume more stuff and more nonsense. So we get this constant accumulation that's ongoing, which actually at the mental level, it destabilizes human beings because they have no longer really, they're drowned in this mental noise and this capacity for accumulation. And then we see it in the current time where it gets exaggerated further, where profits are put before people. So then we see the energy companies making the biggest profits that they've ever made in history, but we're being told there's an energy crisis. So our bills have trebled, even quadrupled in the UK, but the energy companies have made more money than ever. So now what we get is this downward pressure. We then get the inflation that's created by the government through the printing of money, but then that's used against us in order to drive interest rates. So, everyone's money is either being devalued or people are being driven into poverty. But all of this creates noise and more noise. It creates fearful people, and fearful people enjoy no happiness and no freedom at a mental level. So the reverse of this is silence. We need to go from this extroverted world, see the error in it, the fact that it's not created happiness and joy. And if we even just follow the model outwardly and just keep repeating year after year, okay, so we accumulate more. Is there a year? Is it 2025 we get happy? Is it 2028 when the penny drops and everyone experiences peace? And so we can then turn to some of the ancient scriptures and text, and some of the quotes like the peace that surpasses all understanding. And you're scratching your head thinking, okay, there is a peace, but it surpasses understanding, which the realization then, it's beyond the thinking mind. The thinking mind, the powers that be know how to manipulate, know how to indoctrinate, know how to hypnotize in order to create individuals who are simply following associative patterns. And so for us, the retaliation is actually to simplify life, and not only then to get rid of stuff, but also to get rid of the stuff in the form of noise in the head, to return to silence.
Well, maybe I think there's some nuance there, and it's very easy to just project onto the other person an overly simplified view that you disagree with for the purposes of conversation, and that's not what I'm trying to do here right now.
Yeah.
But so let me overstate the opposition, just saying that it's overstated, so don't take it personally. But I'm not seeing enough wealth accumulation amongst freedom-minded people. I'm not seeing enough capitalist in anarcho-capitalism. I want people to get motivated, get productive, get out there, get some wealth, because wealth gives you the agency over the world around you to actually affect change and maybe wake more people up. I want to see more of focus on that than what I'm currently seeing. I'm not seeing nearly enough of it. Now, to step back and talk to the other side, I bet what you're saying is more nuanced in that if you're focused on the wealth as an end into itself, that can be disruptive and unhealthy mentally. And I have a feeling that that's where you're coming from. What do you think?
Yeah. Also, the wealth is available. Yet the wealth becomes available once the individual has regained their moral compass. So it's the fact that going into the silence gives us the opportunity to know who we really are, to answer the greatest of spiritual questions, which is, who am I really? Am I just Greg? Am I just this being that lives to the age of 70 or 80 and then passes over? And so what I'm talking about is a regaining of the moral compass, a resetting of the foundation. Because even though I made millions and lost millions on 3 occasions, what I realized was that I was never happy inside of that. And in fact, the compromises that I were making were too significant for me to want to continue down that path. So where I'm at the moment is rebuilding my foundation through my journeys into silence and into practice in order to then regain wealth, but in a way where I earn the right to the wealth, as opposed to being involved in manipulative practices. Because even though I'm telling you about the court case, yes, it was legal, but it wasn't right.
What made it wrong?
It doesn't serve the greater good. It doesn't serve society, because there's an extraction from the greater good. And just because I'm doing what the system's doing in that regard, for me, it just doesn't make it right. And it doesn't feel right. And the statement, to thine own self be true. Well, if I'm true to myself, yeah, we just took a high-speed shortcut. Why? Because we could, because we were clever, we were bright, and we saw a loophole and we were able to manipulate the system. Does that make it right? No, because it's not for the greater good.
If you follow Passio, though, you would know that, like, just because you feel it's wrong doesn't make it wrong. Feelings don't determine natural law, according to Passio, right? So, like, what was actually wrong about what you did? Like, if I applied my ethics to it, it probably would be something like you took a lot of taxpayer funding, which is technically stolen money, and so in a way you made yourself a co-conspirator in the tax theft crime by taking or benefiting from those assets. That's what I would say was wrong. Again, I don't know what happened, so I could be totally off base, but what specifically for you do you think was wrong about it?
Yeah, so what's really wrong is my divine purpose. So I do believe that we're all born with a specific purpose. Mm. And in this regard, I'm not following my purpose, which is why I come to realize later the reason that I go on to lose the millions 3 times, because I engage in my own stupidity of my mind. I play this mind game of accumulation and think that it's I, me, mine, I'm doing this. So I'm then disconnected from any source greater than myself. I believe I'm this independent force doing all this stuff, and aren't I clever and aren't I bright? Whereas actually the work that I believe that I'm really here to do is the work that I'm doing now, which is to understand the inner work, more about the inner workings, because the more that you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And to begin to then work with that, but to realize, wow, in order to experience real wealth, which is happiness, love, joy, peace, these higher gifts of consciousness, I needed to take a different path with my life. It wasn't about greed and accumulation, which all it did was cause disconnection in me.
Most people you talk to don't say that they have a divine purpose. So I definitely want to come back to that. And don't let me forget. I want to ask you how you found out what that was. But Sam, I feel like we're leaving you out of a lot of the conversation here. Can you describe for us what do you guys mean by silence? I'm assuming that it's basically some sort of focused, peaceful, meditative state. Am I on base there?
Yeah, so it's silencing the mind so that you can access the heart. Now, I've made it sound really easy, but it's actually not to silence the mind, because most people's minds are busy. They've got this monkey mind, thinking, overthinking, talking, and so it takes practice. But when you have moments of silence, you can access the wisdom of the heart. So that's why we run silent retreats. We help people to silence that busy mind, because people are at the moment taking direction from the mind, and actually we should be taking direction from the heart and making heart-based decisions rather than mind and ego-based decisions. And if you look out in the world, most people are not living from the heart truly. And I've been on that journey myself, where I've done, years of spiritual practice, and I'm still on that journey. I'm not done yet till I pass over. But I've witnessed my heart opening, if you like, and Greg's as well, and it really does make a huge difference to your life. So you're kinder to yourself, you're kinder to others. You don't have all these mental constructs that you make up. And also thought is creative. So if we're not in control of this instrument called the mind, if it's just running amok, then that's going to reflect on our external world, on our life. So it's really important to see the mind as a tool, as a supercomputer. Get control of it, know when to silence it, and know when you want to tap into it, to use it, because we've got all the memories there. We don't need them running all the time. So we teach people how to start silencing the mind and getting that sense of calm, so they can, really start having true meditation and accessing their inner knowledge, if you like.
Interesting. I on its face, if I just took the words as they struck me, I think I disagree with you 100%. But I don't. But I don't think that that's a true representation of what you're trying to communicate. So, in my mind, the words strike me as the opposite of what I try and do every day in my life. I try and wake people up to stop feeling their way through life. Feelings is not a good way to come to know any truth or knowledge or wisdom. We have to think more than we feel if we're going to be rational creatures that are successful in life. But I don't think you're disagreeing with that necessarily. I think you're probably saying, do your thinking. This is my attempt at reflecting what I think you're actually saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that you would not say don't think. You would say do your thinking, do your rationalizations, put your mind to work, but don't forget empathy or don't forget compassion as part of the process. And I think you're saying the way to access the empathy and the compassion is to just take time out in meditation once in a while to turn the rational mind down a little bit so that you can maybe make room to hear the empathy. So that's my best attempt at trying to resist my internal motivations to be like knee jerk. Oh, you're wrong. How close was that? Yeah.
So fairly close. I mean, what it's about is it's
there we go.
It's about it's about opening the heart so that you can access all of these things: more empathy, more compassion, more love. And so that when you make a decision, it is a heart-based decision. It's not just from the mind where your heart's shut off. And if we all did that, we would all be more compassionate, more loving. We wouldn't have abuse in the world, for example. We just wouldn't do that to each other. We wouldn't lie. We wouldn't cheat. We would be upstanding members of society if we were all fully in the heart, fully heart open society where we're all connected.
Let me challenge you on that, because I think it's really easy to fall into this mindset where the heart produces the good stuff and the mind produces the toxic, damaging, violent, coercive stuff. But I think you can find feels-based justifications for a lot of the atrocities in history, just as you can find really good, smart, rational justifications for living good, ethical, cooperative lives with the people around you. So I just wanted to push that back. What do you think about that? Because a lot of times I hear that, like, well, you need to stop thinking so much and feel more so that you'll be a better, more loving person. It's like, no. My rational mind can also teach me how to love and cooperate and care and reciprocate rights and property and stuff like that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interestingly, the way that we're talking about it is the ultimate aim is it's a collaboration, because the mind is an instrument And the mind is often given a bad rap. But the only reason it's given a bad rap is because people have never learned to use it in the way that it was intended. And in the ancient systems, they see it as the first gift that was given to mankind, the mind. But in order to be able to use the mind effectively, we need to learn, and this is the central tenet, to control the focus of attention. And the focus of attention is a mechanism of the mind. So now we arrive at a place where we can, as a tool, we can turn the mind on, we can turn the mind off. That means that whenever Patrick chooses to, he can enjoy peace and quiet. Even if there's absolute pandemonium in the street, you, with exemplary control of the technology, can switch off and can go into a place of impeccable silence. So now, once we learn to control the focus, what we're looking to now do is to introduce the heart in as the supercomputer. So the heart, and there's some amazing experiments that have been done by the HeartMath Institute, where what they realized is they were doing tests with cards, and they were showing certain images to people, and they were looking at what the effect was on the individual. And what they noticed was the heart was responding 30 seconds before the card was shown, and it was accurate every time. So they realized through the test that it was non-local, that the heart somehow was gaining information that the mind could know nothing of. So, and another experiment that's fascinating, that has been going on with scientists in the UK, is that they started to look at the point at I'm going slightly off beam here, but I'll come back round. The point at which, after death, when if the soul appeared to leave the body and everything had flatlined, was that the end of the story? And the protocol was to leave the machines on for another 30 minutes. One evening, they forgot to turn the machines off, and the person was deceased. They left the room, and the following morning they came in, and shock horror, after 2 hours, something re-entered the body.
Okay.
Then they've continued these tests, and these are ongoing at the moment. Every time between 2 hours and 5 hours after death, something returns to the body.
What do you mean something returns? Electrical activity? What do you mean?
There's electrical activity again in the body.
Yep.
So, but what I'm just giving you is that there's so much, for me, there's so much that we don't know. So when I meet Advaitananda, who's my teacher, and he starts to train me in the ability to be able to focus the attention, my mind to start with is completely shot. And he says, it's like a weathercock that is just blowing around in the winds, just like all over the place. No control, no ability to be able to focus. But just to give you the idea, when you've got exemplary control over the focus of attention, you can choose to focus on, okay, I'm going to be happy. And you focus on happiness and you stay happy. And you say, okay, I'm going to focus on this challenge that I've got in solving it. And so you take the attention to that and you work on that. Whereas most minds are just completely out of control and they are just being hijacked. The attention's being constantly hijacked.
It's TikTok.
So in taking the woo-woo, it's TikTok. Yeah, it's TikTok. So in taking the woo-woo out of it and learning to use the instrument, the first thing is this perfection of the focus of attention. When we learn to perfect the focus of the attention, we're then able to turn that towards the heart. And then from inside of the heart, this is where then we are able to access what are referred to as higher levels of consciousness. The idea being that in every situation when a problem appears, the equal and opposite solution is always available. And was it Einstein who said, you can't solve the problem with the same level of thinking that created it? And this is then where access to the heart gives us access to the higher levels of consciousness, where the equal and opposite to the problem always exists. So people who have got exemplary focus of attention can go into this center, but they're still utilizing the mind, Patrick, because when the heart opens, it still reflects the information into the mind. So the mind hasn't become redundant.
How much of the Stoics have you read?
Bits. Yeah, I'm familiar with the Stoics and Ryan Holiday. Holiday, is it?
Oh yeah. I know you're talking about. Yeah, I follow the Stoics. Okay. And much of what you're saying is very in line with the Stoics. Meditation, focusing of the mind, maintaining control over that focus. There's immense power and agency in controlling, in taking agency and control over not only what you're thinking about and what you're focusing your attention on, but also taking something you said is a lesson I think the entire world needs to know, is that how you feel at any given moment is up to you. And one of the pieces of language that I've changed in my home, especially with raising my children, is that we don't ever say, how did that make you feel? She made you feel that way. You made her feel that way. This is giving away free agency over your internal emotional state to other people in the world around you. If other people can make you feel in a way, then you are not in control. You may be an owner of yourself, but somebody else is in control of it. And it is a very powerful, world-changing thing to realize that you choose how you feel. You choose the emotional impact that any outside stimulus has on you. That's something that's, right out of the Stoics, and also something that you just kind of alluded to right there. And I would love for everybody to really understand that. Like the entire modern left, with the transgender movement, trying to cry bully the entire world into treating them in a certain way and calling them by certain words, otherwise their feelings will be damaged. It's like, no, your feelings are up to you. You're in control of how you feel and how you react. And literally that one lesson is the antidote to that entire thing that's happening in the world right now. It's like, no. What I do is not in control of how you feel. That's on you. Like that's your job and your brain to think about. The second thing I wanted to say, before I shut up, is when you say the heart, you're obviously not talking about the organ in my chest. You're talking about a different part of your mind, a part of your mind that works subconsciously, that provides us feedback in the form of feelings, emotions, gut feelings, for example. This is still part of the mind, and it's still important to listen to, because there's certainly times where your gut can give you information that causes your rational mind, for example, to reconsider something or to look at something from a different angle than you might have otherwise. So yeah, I'm not trying to rebut you. I'm really trying to agree with you from the perspective of a Stoic, because all of this stuff is definitely in line with how I try and live my life.
Yeah. So the spiritual heart, just to be clear, is referred to as Vijnana Maya Kosha. So in the ancient texts, it's not the anatomical heart. It is in a specific location in the center of the chest. And just so you know, when I was first introduced to it through my teacher and was supported in beginning to awaken the heart center, it was extremely painful. And that's why it's referred to as the guarded heart. So it was shut down, atrophied, and then through meeting him and through following the practices, it began opening and awakening, and more so today than ever before. But just to give you the reflection into nature, in the same way that the trees through their root structures communicate with each other. So we are able to communicate through the spiritual heart. And I've had absolute experiences of this. So for example, if I'm on a call like this with my teacher and I ask him for guidance or information, I immediately feel this center heat up. And in that experience, then I know that he's taken a reading of me. Now it happens when I'm live one-to-one with him. If I ask him, it can happen though remotely, where he can be in Copenhagen and I can be here, and he'll give us an absolute perfect read, but also give us guidance in terms of where we're at on our path, the direction that we should consider taking. But again, we're always at choice. So, but I'm giving you this visceral live experience through my filters and experience of what I've experienced in relation to this center, which I think we can find in the Stoics, and we can find in other systems. And, like the Stoics with Festina Lente, for example, which I think comes from the Stoics. Hurry up slowly. Is this idea of, if we can slow down out of the mind into the heart, then the reason that we're able to hurry up is because we've gone from the limited computer to the supercomputer. And now we're receiving by slowing down, going at that pace that's required to go into that energy center, we receive the information that allows us to speed up exponentially.
It's so funny, because if somebody had asked me prior to this show, I would have said, no. The mind is the supercomputer. The heart is like this retarded child that is right sometimes on accident. So I'm not. I think you have to be careful putting a lot of weight on something that's so subjective as feelings are.
Yeah, and that's why I'm going to introduce you to my teacher, who's agreed to come and have the conversation with you, so that you can have your own experience.
Awesome.
And he's a beautiful soul. You'll love the conversation anyway. And but it's interesting to look at though where the consciousness goes as you learn to focus the attention, and you then, for example. Not that he'll demonstrate it to you, I can't claim that he will, but Sam and I have got absolute live experiences of him reading our minds perfectly, purely.
Many times.
Many times. And, you're like, it destabilizes you for a moment. You're like, he's answering the question that you're thinking, but you've not moved your lips.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I look forward to the chat. That will be interesting. I will. I'll. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or tell people about while we're here?
So yeah, we just want to tell people about what we do. We have the Quantum Questions, which is a company where we still online.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still here.
Yeah, sorry.
I made you big so people can see you.
So yeah, we have online courses for people who are interested in personal and spiritual development. If you want to open your heart, help to heal relationships, learn ancient teachings that were actually written thousands of years ago, but for today, for the world, because the world has lost the moral compass. So it's a course called How to Live a Good Life. And the teachings are incredible. It's a 12-week course and it's online. And we do other courses as well online. We also run retreats in the UK and worldwide, actually. And do you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I just encourage people to, if you've not yet begun to discover silence, I would encourage you to start to look in that direction. As I was saying to Patrick, to just see if you can begin to slow yourself down sufficiently to regain control of the mind center. But then to realize that we do have options, we do have choices. And once we regain control of the attention, you as individuals, as human beings, can begin to focus on what it is that you want, as opposed to constantly being told, you will have nothing and you will be happy, for example. So
awesome. All right. Well, I've enjoyed the chat, and I appreciate you letting me push back a little bit in certain places. And I think you're on to a lot of good wisdom that comes from multiple schools of thought, so to speak. Like it's like 5 different cultures have said some of the same things in different ways, and the ancient Greeks are one of them. So that's cool. Well, all right. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Next time, though, I want to find out more. Like, we can have you back and we can talk about where you heard about your divine purpose from. I'm interested in maybe picking that up next time. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hanging out in the comments. You've been good. Until next time, peace, love, and anarchy.
Bye-bye.